Go.
Welcome back, class. I hope you had a great weekend. I know I did. This week we're going to learn a little bit about independent and dependent variables. That's our objective right now, and I want to teach you guys a little bit about them. But to start out, I want to talk about a little story that we did last week. We were learning about how to form a proper hypothesis, and that is so important in science, so important in experiments. Independent and dependent variables are just as important, and if you know how to do them, even though they're basic, they can get you through any experiment, and you're going to succeed. So last week, we were in a group lesson, and we worked in a group project, and Kate was working with Jersey, and Jersey was working with Andrew, and they were all dependent on each other. You were all dependent on each other to get that work done. But if Kate was working alone, she would be independent of Jersey and Andrew to get that work done. So those are our two main words for this lesson, with independent and dependent variables. So what are independent and dependent variables? We're going to find out right now. An independent variable is the variable that the scientist has chosen to change in an experiment in order to test the hypothesis. So the scientist is going to change something to see how something else reacts in order to test his educated guess, his hypothesis. On the other hand, a dependent variable is the variable that the scientist observes and measures over the course of the experiment. So based on what the independent variable does, the scientist is you're going to see a change in the dependent variable. It's going to react to the independent variable. It depends or responds to the independent variable. So those are what we're talking about today. And I want to show you guys a little example of how we can apply this concept to any experiment that we're doing. So here's our scenario. A scientist wants to study the impacts of withholding food from an animal for an extended period of time. What's the independent variable and what's the dependent variable? Well, what is the scientist changing? The amount of food given to the animal, right? So the scientist is going to change the amount of food, and what's going to depend on that or react to that? What's the dependent variable? And that's the amount or type of impact on the animal. So the scientist is going to change the independent variable and measure the results of the dependent variable. So I want to test you guys. I want to do a little mini assessment here to see if you guys know how to do this stuff as well. Okay, here's our example. A scientist wants to study how stress affects heart rate in humans. The scientist proposes an experiment to test out his hypothesis. What's the dependent variable and what's the independent variable? Well, does anyone know the independent variable in this? Yes, Kate?
The amount of stress.
Good job. So it's the amount of stress. So the scientist is going to put stress on the humans, and what's going to react to that? What's the dependent variable? Does anyone know? Yeah, Andrew.
The heart rate?
Right. So the heart rate, the amount of stress is going to react with the heart rate. The heart rate's going to react based on the amount of stress. It's going to depend on the amount of stress. Great job, guys. Okay, let's move on to one more to see how well you know it, just to make sure we know it really well. Okay, here's our example. You're interested in finding out which color of flowers are preferred by butterflies for pollination. You choose an area inhabited by butterflies and measure the pollination of flowers based on their colors to test your hypothesis. What's the independent variable and what's the dependent variable in this experiment? Does anyone know that? The independent variable? Yeah, Jersey?
The color of the flowers?
Good. So it's going to be the color of the flowers. The scientist is going to change the color of the flowers so the butterflies will react to that. Does anyone know the dependent variable? Yes, Andrew?
The butterflies?
No, very close. Good job. It's actually going to be the amount of pollination, because once the scientist changes the colors, the butterflies are going to change their pollination patterns, and that's going to depend on the colors. Okay, I think we know it now. I think you guys are going to be really great next week, and I just want to teach you guys a little chant that I made up to help us really solidify and learn this concept, okay? I'll do it once, and we'll all do it together, and we'll make sure we really know independent and dependent variables. Okay. In science problems, variables are key. If you learn them well, you'll never miss. Yeah, you'll see. An independent variable is what you change so you can measure the dependent variable on a range. Okay? Sound good? Let's try it all together. Ready? In science problems, variables are key. If you learn them well, you'll never miss. Yeah, you'll see. An independent variable is what you change so you can measure the dependent variable on a range. Okay, one more time, guys. In science problems, variables are key. If you learn them well, you'll never miss. Yeah, you'll see. An independent variable is what you change so you can measure the dependent variable on a range. Good job, guys. You really did really well in this lesson. I'm so glad, and I'll see you tomorrow. Good job, guys. Okay.
Jews.